Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Kagaribi 12, which is the biggest Smash event of the year, at least so far. And yes, it is bigger than Genesis. You have pretty much all of Japan's top talent showing up, as well as a handful of invaders, and it's going to be a good time. Our top 16 seeds are Zachary, Yaura, MKLeo, and Reru in 13th, Meister, Osimo, Ken, and T in 9th. In 7th, you're going to have Yoshidora and Shutone. 5th is Hurt and Gluttony. 4th is Zamba. 3rd is Mia. 2nd is Fargo. And projected to win the entire thing is Akola. And before anyone asks about why the seeding is so much different than Delta 8, it's just because the Delta 8 was seeded by NA people, and then you had this tournament being seeded by Japanese people, and typically they tend to overvalue invaders, which I definitely appreciate because it's not too often that they're coming down, and these invaders are cracked, they deserve respect, but that's just why. So before the top 48, it's split into two chunks of the bracket, and as you can see, one half of this tournament is like still a super major by itself. It's pretty crazy, but we're going to be fairly brief because there is so much to talk about. And the first top seed is going to be Akola. I would definitely expect him to take out Takara. He hasn't been as good as he was in 2023, and he hasn't been terrible by any means, but Akola lost a set, so I don't think he's going to lose one here. That's going to be either Tsubaki or MK Big Boss, and I'm honestly not super sure who's going to win this one. I think MK Big Boss has a really real chance to make that upset, considering he has so much experience versus MK Leo's Joker, and now maybe a different style of Joker throws him off, and Tsubaki is a much more gun-orientated Joker, but regardless of who wins this one, I do think that Akola is going to take it. Now, I think Big Boss and Tsubaki have a chance versus Akola. I would say like 80-20, 70-30 in Akola's favor, but Rob does pretty well into Steve. I think Joker has tools versus Steve, and also Tsubaki's just like a really good player. So these guys can upset Akola, but will they? I don't think so. Then you're going to have Yaura or Carmelo, and I do think that Yaura is going to win this one. Most Samus players think that Steve's a pretty tough matchup for Samus, but I think Yaura is pretty positive on this matchup, surprisingly, and one of the good things about the matchup is Samus has no problem destroying the blocks. It's really easy for her to do that. And Yara's form has also been incredible recently, so I do think he's going to win that one. Then you're going to have either Dora Migi or Tai K, and I'm not honestly super confident about who is going to win this one. Sonic is definitely a character that can smother Min, but Dora Migi's form has been so good recently that I am going to predict him to take it. And I also think that he is going to make that upset over Yara. They've played twice before, and both of those sets have gone into Dora Migi's favor, and I just want to say it right now that Dora Migi is criminally underseeded at this event. He should be at least a top 16 seed, and I think he's going to overperform starting with this big upset. Next up is going to be Yoshidora versus Huto, and I would definitely expect him to win that one. I would favor Yoshi versus Wario. It's not by like a crazy amount, but you don't have any disjoints on Wario, you don't have any disjoints on Yoshi, but I just think Yoshi's hitboxes are simply better than Wario, so I think Yoshidora's going to win that one. Then you're going to have Umeki versus Now, and I would expect Umeki to win this one. Now's form hasn't been incredible recently, but he is a player with a very high ceiling. He absolutely could pop off at this event, but you would expect Umeki to win it. Then you're going to have Yoshidora versus Umeki. This one is really interesting to me because they played 4 times before. The first 2 sets go Yoshidora's way. The second 2 sets go Umeki's way. So that means that they're bound to go Yoshidora's way, right? And overall, I would say the matchup is even. And I am going to be going with Yoshidora. And honestly, it's mainly because of the form he was in at Battle of BC. I think he was exceptional at that event, and if he's playing like this at Kagaribi, then he should be able to win that set. They're going to have Ken versus Akio, and I definitely think that Ken is going to win that one. Shulk just gets overwhelmed. You don't have time to set up for Smash Art, for any of the arts, honestly. I don't know why I chose Smash Art specifically, and it's just not a fun time. But you do have some big hitboxes to contest with Sonic. I just don't think that they're enough. Then you're going to have Dio versus Yamanaction, and I would expect Dio to win that one. I think Snake does pretty well into Steve, to be honest, and Yamanaction is a player with an extremely high ceiling, so if he meets it, he could make the upset, but I'm going to go with Dio. Then you're going to have Ken versus Dio, and this was a really tricky one for me. I kept going back and forth between Ken and Dio, and ultimately, I decided to stay with the top seed of Ken. Seg actually does really well into Sonic. I would say that that matchup is even, and we haven't seen a ton from Ken recently, so we don't know his form, but the last time that we saw Ken, he was exceptional, and I assume that he's still going to be at least good. Next up is going to be Zamba versus Roki, and Zamba should win this one. Last time he was in Japan, he ended up dropping a couple sets to low-tier players, shouts to Toilguri and Gachapi, but there's no way that the Rob player should lose to the Isabel player, and also Zamba's form has been excellent recently, so I'm going to have him winning that one. Then you're going to have Aka versus Riziasu, and I'm honestly not super sure who's going to win this one, but I'm going to go with Aka so we get the timeline of Zamba versus Aka in Japan. He can't read the language. He's not going to know what spells are out, but he's playing Rob, which is arguably Hero's worst matchup. So I'm still going to be going with Zomba, but he's basically going to be playing a Mario Party minigame, just trying to react to Akka pulling out the menu and just immediately putting up his shield. It should be a fun matchup to watch. Then you're going to have Zachary versus Shiryuki, and I would expect Zachary to win this one. I have no idea which character he is going to play, and I don't know what form he's going to be in. All I know is that Zachary is very good at this game. Then you're going to have Gak versus Matsunabe, and I think that Matsunabe is going to make the upset over Gact here. I've been really impressed by his play. I think Falco does beat Ness, and I think that he's going to win. And I want to point out that if Zachary and Gact play, Zachary isn't 1000% going to win. Of course, Gact can make the upset. He's a very good player. But I would heavily favor Zachary versus Gact, and I would also favors Zachary versus Matsunabe, but it's not as significant. I think Matsunabe has a very real chance of making the upset over Zachary, and it really all does come down to which characters you're going to play. I assume that it's going to be the Pit, and I think Pit Falco isn't a terrible match for either character. If I had to guess, it's probably even maybe slight Falco favor, but I think Zachary is going to overcome regardless of who he gets. Our next matchup is going to be Hurt versus Sue, and I do think that Hurt is going to win this one. In my opinion, Snake is the best killing character in the entire game, and Lucario is not going to be getting Orda, like, at all in this set, so he should definitely win. Then you're going to have Big D versus I'm, and I would expect Big D to win this one as well. Ice Climbers is a very tricky matchup for Sheik, and I've been hearing about Sheik players talking about, oh, you could just camp Ice Climbers, Fundy, Sheik in the neutral, but Big D in neutral is like the scariest part about him as a player. That's the reason that he's the best Ice Climber player in the entire world. That's the reason his Sopo goes so hard, is because he's just better than a lot of people. And I'm is definitely a scary opponent, but with the matchup on his side, I do expect Big D to win that one. Then you're going to have Hurt versus Big D, and this time the matchup is definitely on Hurt's side. I would be shocked and appalled if Hurt ended up losing this one. And Big D is really good at the matchup. He's even taken out Apollo Kage before, but I don't think he's going to take out Hurt this time around. Then you're going to have T versus Masha as our final thing to get into the top 48. And I am going to be picking T to win this one. But I just want to give Masha the credit that he deserves, because he's one of the most underrated players in the entire world. I could see him making a run to the top 8 at this tournament. He is genuinely insane. He absolutely could beat T, but I have to go with T on this one. He's also very good. And we haven't seen a ton from him in 2024, but his results have been pretty solid. He's got a 9th at Umabora and a 7th at Genesis. Nothing crazy, at least for a player of his standard, but at least he looks like he's in form. Then you're going to have Kananabe Noi, and I'm honestly not super confident about who's going to win this one, so I'm just going to do another cop-out of I think T is going to beat both players. Likely going to be Kazuya for both matches, because Olimar Kazuya, not a lot of fun for Olimar. And Fox Kazuya is a weird one. I do think that it's in Kazuya's favor, because Fox wants to be up in your face, and Kazuya says, that's cool, I'm going to electric you, and you are going to explode. You also can't get that shield pressure versus Kazuya, because the up B kills you at like 90%, so T should move on. Moving on to the other side of the bracket, our first matchup is going to be Spargo versus Reno. And if you don't know, Reno plays Byleth, and I've had this conversation before, and I'll have it again. Any player in the entire world on a sword character versus Spargo, I'm pretty much just going to favor Spargo every single time, except for, like, maybe Shattuck soon, because fundamentally Spargo is just so solid, and usually the fundamentally better player comes out on top. Then you're going to have Todaguri versus Karage, and I'm actually not super confident about who is going to win this one. I am going to be going with Todaguri just because his form has been incredible, but Karage has also been looking really good recently, so there's definitely a chance of an upset there, and we get Spargo versus Todaguri. Very, very real chance of an upset here from Todaguri, but I'm still going to go with Spargo because Cloud back air should be able to deal with Banjo. It should put him away, but that hasn't stopped Todaguri before. There's so many shoulds that this guy's just constantly overcoming. He really is incredible, but I'm going to be going with Spargo to win this one. Then you're going to have Reru versus Jazo, and I do think that Reru is going to win. Luigi is kind of just a better boxer up close than Ken. His damage output is higher, his killing is better. He's just kind of better in every way, and also Reru is like crazy right now. Jazo is coming into the event pretty hot though, considering he had a really nice run at level of Expo, so there is a chance, but I'm going to be going with Reru. Then you have Kameme versus Ryuo, and I do think that Kameme is going to take this one. It's probably going to be the Sora from him, and I have no idea what form he is going to be in, but considering he's only going to like 1 or 2 events a year now since he has a child, he's got real responsibilities. I assume that he's going to be well practiced for this event, and I think he's going to be playing well enough to beat Ryuo. And I also think he's going to be playing well enough to make this upset over Reru. I think both Sora and Mega Man are honestly good choices into this matchup. I just don't have a ton of faith in Luigi versus some of these super top tiers in this game, but that hasn't stopped Reru from constantly proving me wrong, even though this character's recovery is garbage, even though the disadvantage can be really bad, and especially if you get your Cyclone code out in the neutral, and especially in the advantage state. Reru is just such an impressive player, so it should be a banger for the very least. Next up is going to be Shutone versus Miru, and I do think that Shutone is going to win this one. He just feels like a player that shouldn't lose to Kazuya, in my opinion, because of how smart he is and the decision-making skills that he has, and Agent also does pretty well into Kazuya, in my opinion, so should be fine there. They're going to have Tamapi versus Masa, and this could go either way. I don't think the matchup is super heavy in either player's favor. I'm going to be going with Tamapi just because I've got a lot of faith in Tamapi if you haven't figured it out from my Delta 8 video, but Masa is a very talented player. As I was talking about earlier with Masha, one of the hidden talents of Japan, of the game in general, could absolutely go on a run. Then you're going to have Shutone versus Tamapi, and they've only played once before, and I ended up going into Tamapi's favor game 5. But I'm going to be going with Shutone here. There's two reasons for that. The first one is going to be Olimar Bayo was a really bad matchup for Bayo. I don't know how Tamapi won it the first time, and I think winning it 2 times in a row is going to be extremely difficult. And the second reason is I just don't want to jinx him. I already predicted him to go so far at Delta 8 that I feel like if I predict him to go super far at this tournament as well, I'm going to curse him and he's going to drown in pools. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to be going with Shutone to win this one. Then you're going to have Meister versus Rocky, and I would definitely expect Meister to win. Game & Watch just owns in that matchup. It's a really, really difficult one, so he should be fine. Then you're going to have Hito versus Uame, and I think Hito should be fine. I don't think Olimar does particularly amazing into Bowser, and it's not a bad matchup for Olimar by any means. I could even see Olimar slightly winning it, but when we're talking about Bowser, you want to destroy Bowser, because if you don't, Hito is going to hit you once or twice, and you're going to die, especially when you're as light as Olimar is, so he should be fine there. And even though Game & Watch is also very light, Meister should definitely win this one. I do think that Bowser has a decent matchup versus Game & Watch relative to what you expect. It's definitely still in Game & Watch's favor, but you have the command grab. You're going to be killing Game & Watch extremely early. You have some pretty good dish downs with moves like forward air and up tilt, so it's not impossible for the upset, but I'm going to say Meister wins it. And in Group Block, I realized I never said who Rocky plays. He's primarily a Kazuya player, but he also plays Min Min and Steve, and I definitely don't think the Min Min is going to come out. It's probably actually going to be the Steve in hindsight, and I feel like Meister is going to win, but I just wanted to point that out. Next up is going to be Mia versus Goblin, and I do think that Mia is going to win, but you got to give Goblin some credit here. I think they are an extremely talented player, and when they are playing against better players, I think they do even better. There's a couple people like that in this game, but I think Goblin is a prime example of that, but Mia is still a contender for the best in the world, so I think he's going to win that one. They're going to have level 1 versus Base Mage, and I would be a big fat liar if I told you that I knew who won the matchup between Jigglypuff and Toon Link. I don't know, and I don't ever plan on learning who wins that matchup, but I'm going to be going with Base Mage to win this one just because I've been very impressed by his form. He gets that top 8 at Battle of the BC, gets upset really early on in Maisuma Grand Wars, but manages to recover the run super hard, getting all the way to 9th place, and then you're going to have Mia versus Base Mage, and even though Mia or Base Mage isn't playing really well, it isn't well enough to overcome Jigglypuff Game & Watch and to also just overcome Mia. And I do want to really quickly point out that level 1 has taken a set off Mia in the past, even though Mia does win their last encounter. So if he beats Base Mage, there's a chance he can upset Mia, though it isn't a super big one. Then you're going to have MK Leo versus Komei, and I'm not super sure who Leo is going to be playing at this tournament at all, but especially into Komei. If I had to guess, it's probably going to be the Joker, and I do think that Leo is going to win this one, but Shulk can always be a little bit scary because sometimes you take 80% off nothing and then you die because he has Smash Art and he has these massive hitboxes. They're going to have Snow and Omatsu, and I do think that Snow is going to win this one. One of the biggest flaws of Mario as a character is his disadvantage state. It's really weak, but Min Min doesn't really have a juggling game at all, and if Snow is able to create that space versus Omatsu, he's just going to destroy him the second he gets his hands on him, and also he's been incredible coming off a 2nd place at Maisuma Grand Wars. And then we have MK Leo versus Snow. Now, guys, I have faith in Leo that he's gotten over his Mario problem. He's going to pick a sword character, probably Byleth, and he's going to win this matchup. But it's scary. It's Leo versus Mario. Anything could happen. Next up is Gluttony versus Goryoka, and I'm not super sure who Goryoka is going to play here. I think on paper, Joker is the better choice, but in practice, Gluttony probably doesn't have that many reps versus Mewtwo, regardless of the character, though. I do think that Gluttony is going to come out on top. He looks so much better at Game is Game, and I want to say this right now, Gluttony switched controllers, and this is going to be the last weekend where I'm completely letting it slide because he is having an adjustment period of his new controller, but it's been a couple months at this point. He looked way better at Games Game. I think he's starting to figure it out, and it shouldn't be an issue here, but I'm still going to give him a little bit of slack. Then you're going to have Neo versus Alice, and I think Neo's going to win simply just because I think Corrin does really well into Roy, just the better Fire Emblem character. Then you're going to have Gluttony versus Neo, and I'm going to be going with Gluto here. He has won in their only encounter, even though he does end up losing to Shattuck at Genesis. Nemesis. Neo didn't look amazing at Mixed Grand Wars, and I'm pretty confident that he's going to bounce back at this event, but bounce back hard enough to beat Gluttony, I'm not so sure. Then you're going to have Osimo versus Suinoko, and this is another tricky one because I think Younglink actually does really well into Ryu, but I've been so impressed by Osimo. He made like a crazy loser's run. I forget what tournament it was at, but he lost like literally round 1, made it all the way to top 8. He's been very consistent overall, and I'm going to be picking him to win this one. And whoever wins this matchup between Jobu and Bisariman is really important for Osimo because Osimo has a 6-1 record versus Bisariman, and he's won those last 6 sets. And versus Jobu, it's going to be 6-4 in Jogu's favor, and Jogu has won all of their recent encounters. And I think that Bisariman is more likely to win the set just because I think Diddy Kong beats Falcon, but this is very important for Osimo who wins here. I'm going to be going with Osimo overall because I do think that Bisariman is going to win this one. And also, Osimo has still beaten Jogu before. He definitely still has a chance, though it's a little bit harder. Now we have arrived at the top 48, and I know I only predicted 2 upsets to happen so far. Obviously, more are going to happen, but I just have a lot of faith in the top seeds at this event, and our first matchup is going to be Akola versus Doramigi, and I do think that Akola is going to win that one, especially considering that he kind of bops Doramigi with his Aegis the last time that they played, and Aegis does do pretty well into Min. Off stage, you're dying every single time, but you shouldn't be getting off stage because you're just so good in the neutral. And if the Aegis doesn't work this time around, he could just always go back to the Steve and win anyway. Then you're going to have Yoshidora versus Ken, and I do think that this one is going to go into Yoshidora's favor. But they have a really interesting set history because it's 2-2 overall. Ken wins the first set, then Yoshidora wins one, then Ken wins one, then Yoshidora wins one. So scientifically and stats-wise, and all of the numbers are saying that Ken should win, but Yoshidora's form just looked really good, and I don't know Ken's form, so I'm going to be going with what I know. Then you're going to have Akola versus Yoshidora, and Yoshidora is one of the best players in the entire world versus Akola, but Akola has been bopping him in all of their recent encounters. I do think that Yoshi has the tools versus Steve. It's not an unwinnable matchup by any means. I'd say it's like a 65-35 in Akola's favor, and I'm going to go with Akola. Next up is going to be Zomba versus Zachary, and I'm going to skip that for just a second to talk about Hurt versus T. I do think that Hurt should win that one. All things considered, Pac-Man does not do super well into Snake. He has no problem breaking the Hydrant, and the advantage state for Pac-Man doesn't really exist versus Snake because he just ciphers really high up, and Pac-Man up air isn't really a juggling tool, so he has no problem there. It's probably going to be the Kazuya out of T, and in the past, Hurt has struggled versus Kazuya, but I think he's gotten a lot better at that matchup. He's 3-0'd him at port priority, and I just think that Hurt's going to win. And let's go back to Zomba Zachary. The reason that I skipped this is because I think it's the hardest matchup for me to predict of the entire tournament, and I also think it's the most important matchup of the entire tournament. I think whoever wins this matchup has a major influence on who is going to win this event. I'll talk about that when I talk about the top 8, but I think that Zomba is going to win this one. Even though Zachary beat him the last time that they faced and the only time that they faced, I'm just going to be going with the player that I know the form of. I know I've said it a lot in this video, but it really is an important thing to consider. And the reason that I think this matchup is so important is because if Zomba and Hurt play, I think that Hurt is going to be favored in this matchup. Historically, Zomba hasn't been really good versus Snake players. He's gotten a little bit better at it recently, but I don't think it's good enough to overcome Hurt. And if Zachary and Hurt were to play, I think Zachary would win that matchup because the last time they played, Zachary was incredible. The way that he used the Dark Blade arrows was so smart, and I don't really have a solution for that. Now, Hurt is luckily smarter than me. He's probably figured out a way to counterplay against that, but until I see it, I'm just going to go with Zachary because his game plan in that matchup was so solid. So ultimately, I'm picking Hurt to get into the top 8 because I do think that Zomba is going to win this one, but this Zomba-Zachary matchup literally makes the tournament. Next up is going to be Spargo versus Kameme, and I do think that Spargo is going to win this one. Cloud and Aegis, for that matter, do really well into Sora. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the Mega Man came out, but I still think that Cloud beats Mega Man anyway, so Spargo should just win this one. But Kameme is a massive wildcard coming into the event. We have no idea who he's going to play, and he has one of the highest ceilings in the entire game. He is good enough to take out a player of Spargo's caliber, even in a bad matchup. But I'm going to go with Spargo because he might be the best in the world. They're going to have Shootone versus Meister, and we'll expect Shootone to win this one. Aegis Game & Watch is just a really difficult matchup for Game & Watch, and Meister has a lot of experience in it, but a lot of that experience is him not winning the matchup as well, so I would expect Shootone to win that. Then you're going to have Spargo versus Shootone, and this one is really interesting. I think it's going to be Aegis versus Cloud. I can't imagine it's a Ditto or the Olimar coming out for that matter. And I'm going to say that Spargo should win it because, as I mentioned earlier, when it's a Sword Ditto, the fundamentally better player wins. And I just think Spargo is the fundamentally better player. But Shootone is like very close to his level. He is one of the best sword players in the entire world. It's going to be an extremely close match, but I think Spargo is going to eke it out. And the final top 8 qualifier is going to have Mia versus MKLeo as our first matchup. Hopefully, because they always seem to dodge each other in bracket, and Leo has a Mario before this, the Mario before this, so it's definitely scary. But if this matchup happens, I think Mia's just going to win because he plays Steve. I don't think that he's going to be playing Game & Watch in this encounter, considering how many reps Leo has versus Meister and how he's winning like every single one of those reps, as well as having a very good character pool versus Game & Watch. It's probably going to be the Steve. I'm not super sure who Leo's going to play. I think Joker is a decent matchup into Steve, but we haven't seen Leo have any success versus the top Steve player since he bit like a cola at LSI, and that was so long ago, and he also hasn't played any of the top Steve, so maybe he's actually really good at the matchup. He hasn't been able to demonstrate it, and he'd be able to overcome the Game & Watch as well, but I just think Mia's going to win with the Steve. Then you're going to have Gluttony versus Osimo, and I think Osimo is going to make the upset here. He's beaten Gluttony in their only encounter at the Cafeteria Cup. Gluttony in the past hasn't been great versus FGC characters, though I do think he's gotten a lot better recently. I also think just Ryu is a pretty good matchup into Wario. Up close and personal, I do favor Ryu. He just kind of hits harder. He doesn't need to rely on Waft as much, and Fireball is a really annoying projectile in neutral for Wario to deal with, so gonna have Osimo winning that one. Then you're gonna have Mia versus Osimo, and heavy favorite Mia here. Osimo has beaten Mia once before, and Mia has beaten Osimo a whole bunch of times. I'm not gonna say the exact number, and you know what? He's done it once. He could do it again, but probably not. And y'all know the drill at this point. We don't do the loser side just because most of these matchups are simply not going to happen, especially for this tournament. I mean, look at this bracket. What do you want me to do with this? So I've taken the players that are most likely the top 8, and we've given them the percentages. Akola, Hurt, Spargo, Mia. People I picked to top 8 winner side. Zachary, Ken, Yoshidora, Meister. People I picked to top 8 to the loser side. Specifically, Zachary's going to get top 8 through this part of the bracket right here. I do think that T and Shuton are fairly 50-50 matchups, and Snow definitely has a chance versus Zachary as well. But, guys, none of this matters. It's Kagaribi. He is guaranteed to top 8. So if it isn't through this part of the winners bracket over Zomba and Hurt, which is a very high possibility, it's going to be through the losers bracket over T and Shuton. I don't make the rules. You just got to roll with it. Next up is going to be Ken, and I think he's going to beat Hiro here. He should beat Yaura as well, considering he has won their only encounter, and this is likely going to be Gluttony or Osimo, and I would favor him in both of those matchups. He has a really good record versus Osimo, and Gluttony has beaten Ken before, but overall it is definitely a matchup that is in Sonic's favor, so he should win that one. Then you're going to have Yoshidora as my next pick to get into the top 8, and he's likely going to be up against Osimo, Gluttony, or MK Leo, and it really does depend who wins this Gluttony Osimo set, because if this is Osimo Leo, I would favor Leo. If it's Gluttony Leo, I would favor Gluttony. Really, I don't think that Osimo is going to make it to this part of the bracket, but if it does, Yoshidora has like an 8-2 record versus him, so he should definitely win that one. Yoshidora has beaten Gluttony in their only encounter, though it was at a pre-local, but I like Yoshidora more than I like Wario in that matchup. It's realistically probably even, but if I had to favor one, I would favor Yoshidora just because his buttons are better, and MK Leo lost to Ron at Battle of BC, so he'll probably use Yoshidora as well. And the final one is going to be Meister. I think Meister's going to top 8 through this part of the bracket right here. Heavily favored versus Dio. Game Watch Snake is a very tough matchup. I would also heavily favor him versus Doramigi or Reru, and this is likely to be Kameme, but I think that Meister should be favored in that matchup considering the amount of experience he has versus Sora, and then versus Min Meister just does extremely well as Game & Watch. Then you're going to have Meister versus what I think is going to be Zomba, and I would favor him there. Rob versus Game & Watch is a very bad matchup. Now, it could be Zachary, and in that case, a little bit unlucky for Meister because, you know, it's Kagaribi, but that means Hurt would also have to beat Zachary, so it's probably not going to happen. And if it is Hurt here in the loser side, then it's Game & Watch versus Tech. I think Meister has a really good chance to top 8 this major, and looking at everyone else, there's just a big list. Usually I only do 20 players, but there's so many people who could top 8 this event. MK Leo, Zomba, Yaura, Doramigi, T, Shuton, Snow, Kameme, Reru, Gluto, Neo, Tamapi, Tsubaki, Tolaguri, Jogabu, Dio, Gakdu, Meki, MK, Big Boss, Masa, and Masha. Even though I named so many players and I already have 8 guaranteed right here, I can almost like guarantee you there's going to be a player that I didn't mention that gets like at least top 4. And we've arrived at the top 8. We have this lovely graphic here made by Memorization. Their link will be down below. Be sure to check them out and sub while you're down there. And I mentioned earlier on how specifically whoever gets into the top 8 through this part of the bracket right here is really important. And after my top 8 predictions, I'm going to explain why. But our first matchup is going to be Akola versus Hurt. And I'm going to be going with Hurt to win this one. I've been very impressed by his form. And I know that Akola is also going to be in good form, but I just think Hurt has a really good record versus Akola. He was a super competitive set the only time that they've ever played offline, and staked us pretty well into Steve, so I don't see why Hurt should win this one. Then they're going to have Spargo Mia. I've talked about this one so many times in so many different videos. Until Mia wins his set versus Spargo, I'm just going to prep Spargo every single time. The matchup favors him, the history favors him, it's just in his favor. Next up is going to be Zachary versus Ken, and I do think that Zachary is going to win this one. Historically, he's been really good in this head-to-head. They've played so many times before, though, so it really could go either way, but Zachary has multiple characters that he could choose from that I think do pretty well to Sonic, and by that I mean they're probably going even. I think Rob is an even matchup. I think Joker could be an even matchup. I think Pit is definitely in Sonic's favor, but the Zachary pick goes kind of crazy, I'm not going to lie. And also, it's Zachary Kagaribi. I don't even need to explain myself. Next up is Yoshidora versus Meister, and I would definitely expect Yoshidora to win this one. I actually think Yoshi does really well into Game & Watch, and Yoshidora is one of the few players in the entire world that has been able to take out Mia on a multitude of occasions, and I don't see why he can't do the same thing with Meister. Next up is Mia versus Zachary, and Mia did lose to Zachary at Genesis, to the Dark Pit specifically, so Zachary's got a real shot in this set, but I do think that Mia is going to take it. He has been working a lot recently. His form is so much better than it was at, like, Genesis, for example. It feels like in these last couple events he has been really killing it, and I expect him to be able to overcome the things that he wasn't able to at Genesis. Then you're going to have Akola versus Yoshidora, and I touched on this in the winner's side. I would just expect Akola to take it. Yoshidora definitely has a chance. He's one of the best players in the world versus Akola, but it's versus Akola. That doesn't really mean much. So we've got our top four, Spargo Hurt in the winner's side and Mia Akola in the loser's side. And for Spargo Hurt, I talked about this in the Delta 8 video, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but Hurt looked really strong in their encounter at Battle BC. It feels like he was just reading into Spargo a lot and outplaying him in the neutral, but I think Spargo is going to win this time around. He's going to have that data from Delta 8 if they end up playing there, and he's going to be able to use that to adapt to become better in the matchup. I think Cloud can definitely exploit Snake if you know what you're doing, and Spargo knows what he's doing, so I'm going to have him winning that one. Then you're going to have Mia versus Akola, and they have not played since Umabora. I mean, Akola hasn't really been going to anything since Umabora, so fair enough. You do have Akola winning it there. Prior to that, though, Mia was winning a lot of their encounters, and I'm going to be going with Mia to win this one. I think Akola was playing out of his mind at Umabora, and I think the way that this tournament is going to turn out is Akola is going to steamroll everyone. He's just going to absolutely own, or he's going to get 4th place, and since I haven't seen him, I'm just going to assume it's the 4th place. And we've got our losers finals, Hurt versus Mia, and I'm going to be going with Mia to win this one. He played so well at Maizuma Grand Wars in this set, especially compared to how he was playing at Delta 5. It seems like he took a lot of time to properly learn the matchup, and he just looked excellent in it, so I'm going to say that he win that one. And also, it's just a really bad matchup for Snake. And in the grand finals, we got Mia versus Spargo. Unless the Sword Fighter does something crazy, I just think that Spargo is going to win this event and be your grand champion of Kagaribi 12. And I said how I would talk about how that Zachary Zomba set matters. Well, I'm going to talk about it right now. I think if Zachary gets to the top 8 here, Akola should win this one. Then we get Akola Spargo in the winner's side. And I think that depending on how that set at Delta goes, Akola will be ready with the Aegis this time around. He's been prepping it a ton, and I think if he gets a little bit of experience, just a chance to play Spargo and see what he did wrong, he's going to be able to overcome it and finally get over Spargo. And I think if Zomba gets into the top 8 of the winner's side, he's going to beat Akola, and I also think that he's going to beat Spargo. I think if Zomba gets to the top 8, it's very clear the research that he did for this tournament and the form that he's going to be in is good enough. Similar to Genesis, he won it over Spargo at Genesis. I don't see why he can't do it here. So basically, if Hurt gets top 8, I think Spargo wins the event. If Zachary gets top 8, I think Akola wins the event. And if Zomba gets top 8, I think he wins the event. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The sport has been absolutely unreal as of late. I'm curious what you guys think. I know this video was a little bit more convoluted, but there was so much to talk about. So if there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!